Flying the red eye from Dulles to London overnight Saturday into Sunday. Virgin Atlantic Flight 22, usually about a 7.5-hour flight. This one was 6 hours and 40 minutes. Take a look down here. This yellow line is the speed. 23 minutes into this flight, this Boeing 787 hit 800 miles an hour. That is practically unheard of for commercial airliners. Usual cruising speed for this bad boy, around 550 miles an hour. So where'd the turbo boost come from? Well, the National Weather Service posted this to social media on Saturday night, talking about the insane wind speeds of up to 265 miles an hour, up around 34,000 feet. All right, I'm going to head to the studio because I want to get Topper to spill the beans on some of the science behind this whole thing. All right, Topper, and you were talking about these insane wind speeds last week.
Yeah, it sort of fueled the Clipper, and we thought maybe 100 to 200 knots. Oh, no, 200 to 230 knots at around 34,000 feet. That means this plane was going faster than the speed of sound.
Yeah, and at the same time, a flight going in the opposite direction, it took an extra 90 minutes. Adam Longo, WUSA 9. This is the site here for the USGS, the United States Geological Survey. They track seismic activity both here in the United States and around the world. And they tracked this Rockville earthquake last night, about 3 kilometers west of Rockville, a magnitude 2.3, 15 kilometers deep, so 9 miles below the Earth's surface. We have a map that can show you exactly where the epicenter was. We zoom in here between Rockville and North Potomac. This is at the Lakewood Country Club, so right near Shady Grove Road. Here's 270, here is 28. We had a chance to hear from some folks who actually called 911 in Montgomery County last night to report what they heard and what they felt. We'll hear from them, and then also a Maryland geologist. Listen.
Something just either flew over or something happened and the whole house started to shake. All of a sudden there was this loud rumbling and the house shook, and I was like, what the hell was that? It didn't feel like an earthquake because I felt one of those before.
We are on bedrock that is very solid, but we do have cracks in that solid bedrock that accumulate stress over time. It will amount to enough to cause a slight slippage or break in the rocks at depth.
Now, we put out the call to some of you earlier this afternoon. Did you feel it or did you not? Somebody said, nope, I didn't feel it. This person here I can relate to says that he was in Kensington, felt it, heard it, didn't feel it, but heard it, thought it was an 18-wheeler speeding down the street or a fighter jet deployed. I had that same experience. I felt it where I lived last night in North Potomac, just a couple of miles away from that epicenter. Just felt like a helicopter over the house that wasn't coming, that was going, it was just persistent. The dog got up off the couch, started to growl a little bit, and just seconds later, it was all over. Adam Longo, WUSA 9. Okay, so I want to start right here with the most consequential race that we're going to be following after the polls close tomorrow night at 8. This is the Democratic nomination for Maryland's open U.S. Senate seat. The two top candidates we'll be following here, Prince George's County Executive Angela Alsobrooks and also Congressman David Trone. I'm going to be able to show you here, county by county, which candidate performed the best there, and tomorrow night at this time, how many votes are still outstanding and left to be counted. The winner here likely to face off against former Governor Larry Hogan. I also want to show you a few of the key House races that we're following, but before we do that, I want to talk about the presidential contest. Despite the fact that we know that Biden and Trump are going to be their party's nominees, it will be interesting to see how many people vote against them. 15 states so far have seen uncommitted get more than 10% against President Biden as part of a protest vote over the Israel-Hamas war. Also, on the Republican side, Nikki Haley, despite dropping out, is still going to be on the ballot. So how many dissatisfied Republicans will be voting for her instead of Trump? All right, on to those key House races here. And I want to start in District 6, which is in the western part of Maryland, so parts of Montgomery County, Frederick, and the western counties here. A large slate of candidates here. We'll be keeping a close eye on two of them on the Democratic side, April Delaney and Joe Vogel. On the Republican side, you're going to see a few familiar names in this race as well, including Dan Cox, the failed gubernatorial candidate, and Neil Parrott, who has been the GOP nominee in this district twice. To District 3 on the Democratic side, and that's where we are going to see former Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn and the two top fundraisers here, former Officer Dunn against Sarah Elfreth, the state senator, the two top likely vote getters in this race. Keep in mind, voter turnout generally lower in a primary. It was 42% in 2020 compared to 75% of voters that showed up at the polls in the 2020 November election. Now, weather can affect the turnout. The chief standing by with a look at your primary day forecast. Voters in Maryland's Democratic primary for years have had the option of voting uncommitted instead of voting for a Democrat candidate. Now, that option has taken on new importance this year as activists are using uncommitted as a protest vote against President Biden and U.S. policy on the Israel-Hamas war.
We just believe that this is our moral responsibility to protest in this way.
Henna Zuberi is one of the leaders of the Listen to Maryland campaign, urging voters to check uncommitted. It continues a trend we've seen throughout this presidential primary season. 15 states so far have seen uncommitted get more than 10% of the vote against President Biden.
People are really surprised that there's this option and who are for ceasefire, and they're like, yeah, definitely we'll be on board, and we'll tell more friends of ours that this is an option.
Volunteers got together tonight over Zoom for phone bank training. They're calling Maryland Democrats to get the word out, but some haven't been so receptive.
We have gotten a lot of we stand with Israel, and we believe Biden's doing really great. He should do more.
One criticism the group is working to avoid is that an uncommitted vote against Biden is somehow a vote for Donald Trump. Zuberi says their sole focus is this primary, not November's general election.
We can very safely exhibit our concern without having to worry about what happens in November. None of us are concerned that Trump is going to win in Maryland at all.
Zuberi and other leaders of this movement are planning to be in Silver Spring on Thursday for a Vote Uncommitted Maryland statewide rally. That starts at 4 o'clock. I've got more details in my story on WUSA9.com. No coincidence that Thursday is also the first day of in-person early voting in the Maryland primary. Adam Longo, WUSA 9. Hey, so let's piggyback on something that Congressman Raskin just said. Angela Alsobrooks underestimated. Look at the numbers as they are right now. Her with 54% of the vote and David Trone with 41.9% of the vote statewide across Maryland, still with about 33% of the votes to be counted. None of the polls that we saw leading into this primary looked like that. Not at all. They were all lopsided, showing David Trone in the lead. Some polls marginally, other polls by a much larger percentage. I want to show you how she did across the state. Now, picture Maryland here for a second as a shirt, a button-down shirt. Angela Alsobrooks took up the buttons of Maryland, right up the center, right in the population heart of the state. You see these large circles here? Those are the population centers, the ones that you see in purple and shaded purple. Those are the ones that favored Alsobrooks. The ones in the turquoise are the ones that favored Trone. So you see how well she did in Baltimore County, in Baltimore City, also leading right now by a small margin, smaller than the other counties, in Montgomery County. Look where her voters turned out big time, though. More than 80,000 votes cast in this race in Prince George's County. She absolutely tore it up there in her home county. Also, where you see Trone did better in the lesser populated areas across the state. So you're looking at Western Maryland, Frederick County, and the Western counties, and also through the Eastern Shore as well. So Angela Alsobrooks, she's going to want to do some specific work through Montgomery County and Frederick County, which is one of the swing counties. That could be key in defeating Hogan for her coming up in the November general election. A couple other interesting things I want to point out here. On the Democratic side, the race for president, okay? So we know that Joe Biden and Donald Trump are the presumptive nominees of their party. But we were interested in seeing how many voters would vote uncommitted. In this race so far, you see just over 10%, which would make Maryland now the 16th state to go uncommitted over 10%. Is that a problem for Joe Biden? We talked to some of the organizers of this movement trying to urge people to vote uncommitted as a sort of a protest vote against the Israel-Hamas war. They say, hey, this has locked us in for the primary, not for the general election. One other thing to keep in mind, that a lot of people don't remember, in 2012, the uncommitted vote against Barack Obama, when he was running for his second term, was 11.5%. He still won re-election handily. I want to also show you what this looks like on the Republican side. Okay, so Donald Trump, obviously the winner in the state, but Nikki Haley, who has dropped out, got 20% of the vote. She hasn't seen numbers that high since she was actually in the race back on March 5th on Super Tuesday. So is this a foreboding sign for Trump in Maryland and for Republican candidates in the Maryland? Too soon to tell on that, but something definitely worthy of interest and worthy to follow. Guys? Des, there are a lot of just big smiles across campus that we're seeing here tonight. The anticipation is there. Definitely a lot of students feeling it. For the JMU Dukes men's basketball team, this will be their 6th appearance in the NCAA tournament, but only their 2nd in the last 30 years, going back to 1994. So since before this undergraduate class was even born. We were inside of their basketball arena last night for a women's game, so we had a chance to talk to a lot of the students here about this excitement and what the atmosphere is like on campus right now.
It just brings this extra pizzazz, this extra feeling of just like, this is where I want to be.
Oh my gosh, it's electric. Everyone is like pumped all the time. Like, the school spirit is through the roof. Like, I've just never seen people more proud to be here than they are right now.
At last night's JMU women's basketball game, students, alumni, and fans of the program are pumped about athletics here and its ascent onto the national stage.
I mean, it definitely puts a big light, especially on the basketball program.
I think we're like finally getting the attention that we deserve and more. It's just coming.
I think our applications speak for themselves. They've been shooting up in the last couple of years, and it's really exciting to see more and more people aware of JMU and excited for our future.
This student from Loudoun County and others talked to me about certain perceptions about the school that they hear throughout Northern Virginia.
I think there's a stereotype that we're below Virginia Tech and below UVA, especially athletically, and this year itself has proven that we are not there anymore.
I think JMU has always been our underdog. We've always been a school people don't really know about. They're not like thinking about JMU. And then we go out there on that national stage and we just kill it at sports. Like, and you see all the fans and you see the energy. People love it here and it shows.
That we're kind of like underdogs, or like we're not as good as we seem, but I feel like we've really proved everybody wrong recently.
Now, the Dukes are actually the underdogs in this game tonight. They are the 12th seed taking on 5th-seeded Wisconsin. This team only lost 3 games all season long, only 1 here at home, and they started their season with a win over then 4th-ranked Michigan State. So they are here in this tournament tonight playing to prove that they belong. Now, listen, come back with us tonight after the coverage, because that is the 9:40 game tonight, the last game of the night. We will be coming on with our newscast right after that. We're about to head downtown to stake out a spot right now because all the folks in town, alumni and students, are going to be gathered along Main Street. We are going to be right there with them. Des, Leslie, Zoe, you never know what's going to happen. Friday night, college students, big bar, whatever happens in the game could be pretty big. Y'all are going to want to see this.
We have many steps to go. This will be investigated. This will be examined.
Northern Virginia Democratic Congressman Jerry Connolly pledging it isn't over. The Republican chairman of the House Oversight Committee agrees.
We have a lot of concerns in addition to the site selection as to whether or not the FBI is deserving of a building with that price tag.
The decision last Wednesday night to award the new FBI headquarters to Greenbelt in Prince George's County was mired in controversy by Thursday morning.
I understand Virginia being a little concerned that they did not win this.
FBI Director Christopher Wray sent a letter to FBI employees alleging that Nina Albert, the woman in charge of selecting Greenbelt, was biased towards Prince George's County and had a conflict of interest since she previously worked for WMATA, and it owns the land in Greenbelt where the new FBI headquarters is slated to be built.
This has been a very clear process. She was vetted properly. She passed every review.
Albert has not responded to our multiple requests for comment, and she now works for Mayor Bowser's administration.
I asked my general counsel to look into all of the concerns that were raised in Director Ray's letter, and they found those to be without merit.
He says we have concerns about fairness and transparency in the process and GSA's failure to adhere to its own site selection plan. So he didn't just say there were problems. He said you didn't follow your own rules. And you say that's not true?
Our general counsel found that we did follow all of the rules.
What do you say? You're the boss.
I agree that we followed all of the rules.
Everybody knows that we need a new FBI headquarters.
Do you believe that the FBI needs a new headquarters?
Absolutely not.
145 Republicans voted last week to prohibit Congress from buying the Greenbelt site. The move failed, but it is likely to be raised again.
If that facility is indeed terrible, I mean, again, why are they trying to, again, locate it in Washington, D.C.? You can get way better, cheaper land in other parts of the country, so why do they want to consolidate it?
We have common interest in looking at this particular issue. We do not have the same motivation for why.
Congressman Connolly not ruling out voting with Republicans to keep the government from buying the Greenbelt site. That's one of the next steps in this process. Now, I tried to speak with Administrator Carnahan after the hearing. I just wanted to ask if you could assure our folks on this side of the Potomac that the process was fair for FBI.
Absolutely.
Absolutely is what she said there. Now, as for Congressman Connolly, again, Democrat, from Northern Virginia. He is going to be teaming up with the Republican chairman of the Oversight Committee, James Comer of Kentucky, in asking for an inspector general investigation of the process that played out and ultimately landed Greenbelt with essentially the victory in landing FBI headquarters. There's one other thing that I asked Congressman Comer about, and that was he alluded to the fact that they might want to have a standalone hearing inside of the Oversight Committee to talk about specifically the FBI site selection process and some other Republican grievances with the FBI. Congressman Connolly says he supports that, and we could see that moving forward at a later date. Simone? Just within the past half hour, I talked to Maryland Congressman Glenn Ivey, who says he is a hard no on this. He thinks it's a sweetheart deal for D.C., and he's concerned that the taxpayers could be on the hook, the federal government could be on the hook for some unforeseen costs. So what is this bill actually all about? So RFK, right? It hasn't been in use since 2017. That was, 6.5 years ago. That was the last time that DC United played there. So this bill, what it would actually do, it would empower the district, right, by entering into a 99-year lease with the federal government to be able to use the land, to be able to develop a stadium, to be able to possibly bring in commercial and residential areas as well. Now, this hasn't been discussed since last September, really. That's when it was in the House Oversight Committee, and it passed by a wide bipartisan vote. It was 31-9 there, but there was a little bit of controversy in that hearing. There was an amendment that was brought up that eventually did fail. It was voted down. An amendment that would have to do with public financing for a stadium. The Maryland delegation and some other folks didn't think it was a good idea that D.C. should have the authority to be able to use public money to finance a stadium, like many other NFL stadiums and cities have entered into partnerships in the past and done that. So that amendment failed, but it did put Maryland on the record as wanting to vote against this. So we do expect members of the Maryland delegation to vote against this. Well, primarily because, look, where do the Commanders play right now? In Prince George's County in Maryland. So coming up in the next hour, we'll hear from Glenn Ivey on why he doesn't think that it's such a good idea. Also, once this bill does pass the House, if indeed that does happen today, it would still need to pass the Senate and get the president's signature in order to go into effect. So I'll be back with you here in the next half hour with an update on that, and also the big news on the opposite side of the Capitol today about the longest serving Senate leader in history, Mitch McConnell, announcing today he will relinquish his title coming up in November. We're live outside the Capitol. Adam Longo, WUSA 9.
Busy.